Hello, my name is Annie Tahin, and I'm going to be expressing my thoughts on the books Butterfly Yellow and The Best We Could Do. The first one being the historical fiction Butterfly Yellow by Tan Ha Lai. So, the book Butterfly Yellow surrounds the character Hang, and this is during the time of the end of the Vietnam War, so around 1975. And Hang is with her brother at an airport trying to go to the United States for a better future. And there are complications at the airport that cause Hang's brother to be separated from her and ends up going to America alone with other people, while Hang stays in Vietnam for 6 more years. During those 6 years, she tries her best, and eventually she's able to go to America, and she ends up in Texas to reunite with her brother and her other extended family. However, once she's there, she realizes that her brother does not remember her because he was so young back then. There were so many great points that I would have never thought of, honestly. Um, the language barrier was a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. Hang wanted to speak to her brother, but because her brother doesn't even remember her and remember his life back in Vietnam because he was so young, he doesn't even remember how to speak Vietnamese and therefore couldn't understand her. And it was so heavy when I had to read that part because you just start to realize that she has been preparing herself mentally and been really excited to see her brother, and then when she gets there she can't even communicate with him, and it's as if she has two versions of her little brother, the one that she remembers and the one now. This storyline honestly was set up so beautifully, but I honestly have so many things that I would have changed because I was honestly really disappointed with the outcome. So the biggest thing for me was this cowboy named Leroy. Leroy is a guy that pops up, I would say, in the middle, beginning to middle part of the story. And he is the person that makes Hang more comfortable and feel more accepted in America. With her language barrier, it was really difficult for her to feel comfortable talking to people, including her own family. And Leroy gets her comfortable, becomes friends with her, and the whole story kind of derails from this whole loving family relationship with her brother, like this bittersweet tale, and kind of turns into a romantic, like a dramatic romance. Like, the thing that makes me upset about this is I don't care. I personally did not care for Leroy. I felt that this story could have been so beautiful, as a lot of people were separated from their family during the war, especially after the war when everyone was trying to escape to other countries for a better life. My grandfather got separated from his brother during the war and ended up never finding him again. So I thought that this was going to be such a beautiful storyline that would make me understand and empathize with people were that had such a tough life. However, it was just really disappointing because there was so much potential that was swept under the rug and forgotten. When I picked up this book, I was excited to read about Hang and her little brother reconnecting, and instead it became this weird dramatic love story. At one point, there was a car chase and a knife was pulled, and by then I was tired of all these random things happening that seemed to have no place in this story. I honestly, if it was up to me, I would have kept Leroy as a side character. Leroy definitely was an impactful character to make Hang more comfortable to be in the States. She felt like she couldn't talk to anyone because it was hard for her to talk to people, and without Leroy, she probably would have taken a lot longer to make friends and, most importantly, connect with her brother again. However, I didn't think this romance was important. It was not essential to the story at all. It kind of seemed like a random thing that just kind of popped in, and the rest of the story definitely just took a turn that I wasn't expecting. Um I think maybe I would have made Leroy a side character that was Hang's best friend, and maybe at the very end had a romantic relationship with her. I definitely would not keep the majority of the story a romance. That was so unneeded for me and it was kind of a waste of such a good plot. But that is what I would have changed. The rest of the story, the beginning storyline was honestly amazing to me, but it was just the middle to end that I was very disappointed by. So the next book I'm going to talk about is one of my favorites that I read this year called The Best We Could Do by Tay Boy. And it is a nonfiction. And this book is an autobiographical narrative. I wasn't planning to get super emotionally invested in this book because I knew I would relate to it more deeply because of my family history. My grandparents and my parents escaped from the Vietnam War, and I knew I would connect with it more than other people. However, this book hit me hard, and it was an emotional journey about the immigrant experience. I felt that I could see my parents in certain parts. As an immigrant child, I could really relate to her experience of not being able to feel accepted in either my home country or America. This talk about identity, about family, it was so important and so pertinent to the story, and I felt that it was beautifully written. This was a comic, and Tay really drew each character the way that she wanted to portray them, and it was so nice and raw to be able to see the little details of her speaking about the pain, the horror, the PTSD of people of war. Civilians that are just trying to live their lives who end up dying, losing their homes, losing family and friends, get injured, lose their businesses, everything that they've ever known, and then end up being forgotten in history. It made me think about my grandfather because he had a business back in Vietnam, and when the war was over, the people ended up taking a lot of businesses, a lot of people's homes, their belongings, and it just makes me think of how traumatizing that must have been for him. There were The biggest part of this story that I felt most impacted by was when when Tay was talking about how she realized that her family was human. And by that, she said that she never understood why her father was so depressed and angry all the time as a child. But as an adult, she realized that he went through a lot, went through a war, and he was just a very scared child trying to do his best. And as he gets older, that is really the best that he could do with all the limited resources that he has, and he didn't know exactly what to do certain times. As the book title states, the best we could do. It hit me a lot because as a child, you don't realize that your parents are regular people. You see them as this elevated being who always has security for you and that will always have your back. But once you get older, you start to understand that adults don't have all the answers and they're just trying with their knowledge of what they could do for you. Which leads up to the point that I want to say about this book. I think the one thing that I would have added in if I was Tay would be her understanding, her realization of how her next child would end up treating her. Because throughout the entire book, she speaks about her family, her mother, and her father, and their experiences in the past that led them to be a person, the parent that they are today, that influenced her. So, by speaking about these things, she's talking about generational trauma, about how generational trauma can heavily affect how someone ends up parenting their own child. And each generation has a different set of those. Her parents went through generational trauma of war, of very complicated familial settings because everything was so like rambled up by war itself. And because of that, they have taught her things that might have given her trauma as well, that made her lash out at her parents for not understanding what it's like to be an American that doesn't feel very American in this state, in this country. I wish she would have talked more about how she could see herself treating her own child and being in fear of giving him or her some type of generational trauma herself. But I honestly think that that would have wrapped up the story very well because um, the story in the beginning was past and then in the middle it was present. But she didn't have that much talk about future. And if she had that future part, I feel like it would have been very good. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you very much.